Hello, and welcome to Sunday School with First Baptist Church of Greensboro. I'm Reverend Courtney Willis, and I am grateful that you have chosen to be here with me today as we continue to dig into the scriptures together. As always, I am using the Formations literature as the base of our Sunday school class. You can pick that curriculum up in the atrium at First Baptist anytime, but you don't need it in order to participate. You can simply follow along, you can listen along. I hope I'm going to tell you everything you need to know for this particular lesson each week. Whatever has brought you here today, I'm so glad that you are. If you're by yourself watching this, I hope that you'll take time to think about the questions that I ask, to really reflect on the scriptures in a personal way. If you're sitting with others, I hope you will share with them what this brings up for you, what the scripture has to teach you, what your life has had to teach you, and how God has moved in and through your life. Today, we're going to be in both the Old and New Testaments. We're going to start in Proverbs chapter 22, and then we're going to head to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. So I've already got my Bible turned to Proverbs 22. If you want to do that, you can, since we're then going to flip on over to the New Testament later. If you don't have your Bible, though, that's fine. I'm going to read it out loud when we get to that in just a moment. My question for you today, as we start thinking, I hope is one that elicits a lot of joy for you. Who is a person in your life who always seems to bring out the best in you? Who's someone that brings out the best of who you are whenever you're around them? And how is it they're able to do that? I'd love for you to share that. Take a moment to reflect on it. Who brings out the best in you, and how do they do it? I think that it's fair to say that if you're anything like me, you're often thinking about what is the Christian's role in the world. If we are claiming to follow Christ, then what does it mean that we are supposed to do? How does it mean we are called to behave or act? For some, it is to embody God's love for others and to encourage them to be all that they can be. Others might say that being a Christian in this world is to be a beacon of moral purity, to make choices that are only reflective of God as much as possible. How we define our role will affect our understanding of God, of how we live, of how we relate to others, and with whom we associate. So it's important to think about the intention we're setting behind what we believe our role to be, because it affects every decision that we make. Both of today's passages, Proverbs and Corinthians, offer guidance about how we should live. And they talk about with whom we should associate, and they give us some caution flags to heed. So let's dive in. We're going to jump right into Proverbs today and see what the scriptures have to tell us about who we should live with, how we should live, and what we should be wary of. So again, we're in Proverbs chapter 22, and today we're going to read verses 24 through 28. And they say this: Make no friends with those given to anger, and do not associate with hotheads, or you may learn their ways and entangle yourself in a snare. Do not be one of those who give pledges, who become surety for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? Do not remove the ancient landmark that your ancestors set up. Proverbs 22, verse 24. Make no friends with those given to anger. Don't associate with hotheads. This is a simple admonition just to avoid those who are prone to anger, to those who are prone to being led by that anger. And then verse 25, because you might learn their ways and you might start to behave that way. It says that spending time with a person who's prone to anger might lead us to live similarly. And a little psychology backs up this warning as well. A person prone to anger often has particular qualities of character. They may be emotionally immature, they may be defensive or insecure or rigid in their understanding. Such people are rarely persuaded by rational arguments. A defensive person is unlikely to reflect on themselves or their position. So, engaging with this person with the hopes of altering their perspective is probably going to be a waste of time and it's going to be exhausting. If one chooses to engage with such a person, the illogical, defensive, and emotionally driven responses can lead to a lot of frustration. The lesson from Proverbs might be to make sure that we are not argumentative people and to avoid engaging with those who are going to lead us to a point of anger. Further in the section we read in verses 26 through 27, the Proverbs talk about money and debt. Don't be one of those who give to pledges, who become surety for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? This warning against co-signing for a debt, which is what this is repeated several times in the book of Proverbs. But it's hard to discern the specific situation that these verses are addressing. It seems to come a little bit out of nowhere. But when we think about the proverb that giving a pledge or an item of value as collateral for a loan was a common practice in the ancient world. And so it becomes a little more relevant for us there. A friend or family member might be asked to offer such a pledge or a surety for a loan on behalf of someone else. And if a person defaulted on a loan, the relationship was likely strained. I'm guessing you can think of examples in your own life or those whom you have loved where this has come to pass, where something has been loaned, and it could be something financial, it could be something tangible, with the expectation that that thing would be paid back. When it's not paid back, it creates some friction. And so the Proverbs are warning us against enabling that friction to take place. It's often wise to avoid blurring the lines in a relationship. In the practice of psychotherapy, for example, a therapist avoids a relationship with a client other than being that of their therapist. Our family has a therapist who one of us sees that we recently found out lives down the street from us. And that therapist has put in place boundaries so that that's not a relationship we're going to have socially. It doesn't mean we don't speak to each other or wave when we pass by, but we don't have a friendship that's not based in the therapy that's being given. It's a similar thing that we're talking about here. To do otherwise compromises the objectivity, the purpose of therapy, not to mention it violates a code of ethics for sure. But similarly, awareness of the dangers of mixing roles and muddying relationships is an important aspect of entering into financial arrangements with a friend or a family member. I wonder if you can think of how we can take care of the poor or those who need help, maybe even especially our friends and family, while still looking out for our own well-being. If the scriptures say, be careful about co-signing on a loan, what is the alternative? What is the alternative to those blurred lines, especially when it's someone in need whom we love? What would you think? What are some creative ideas or some thoughts that you have about how to do that? Take a moment to think on it. That brings us to the last verse that we read, verse 28. Do not remove the ancient landmark that your ancestors set up. Again, this feels like it's out of nowhere a little bit, doesn't it? It seems like an odd instruction to be given. And when taken out of context, it definitely is. But landmarks were markers on the land to designate property lines. So that's an important reference. And so if we read it that way, it sounds a little bit different. Don't remove the property lines that your ancestors set up. The reference to an ancient landmark suggests these were long established, accepted boundaries. And these markers happen to be fairly easy to move. If someone was poor, it would be hard for them to defend their land rights in a court if the landmark had been moved. The influence of the wealthy could prevent a poor person from receiving a fair hearing, from claiming their fair share of the land. Earlier in verse 22, which we didn't read, but I'm going to read it for us now. It says, do not rob the poor because they are poor, or crush the afflicted at the gate. For the Lord pleads their cause and despoils of life those who despoiled them. Do not rob the poor. They are poor. Don't crush them. This instruction comes with a warning that God is on the side of the afflicted and will take from anyone who takes from them. Now, this takes us to Corinth. In Paul's time, the church in Corinth finds itself in a city in Corinth, which is an important economic center with a large and diverse population. If you've been with me for long, we have talked a lot about the robust population and business that's happening, that's bustling in Corinth. And the church that Paul founded there struggled with division among their members because they're each championing their own favorite teachers. In Corinth, there were just tons of folks everywhere sharing a new message, teaching a new word, and everybody has their favorites. You can think of it now as people that a podcast you love to listen to, or an author that you love to read. And it doesn't mean you're not a Christian and don't follow Jesus, but there are other people whose voices we like to listen to. In Corinth, we find some of that division happening. Paul has heard about tensions in the congregation over this, and some of the members have written to him for clarity and for instruction. So we're going to go ahead and flip over to 1 Corinthians chapter 5, little Bible drill today. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and we're going to read verses 9 through 13. Believe that's right. Yes. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 9 through 13. And again, this is Paul writing to the church in Corinth about how to behave with one another and in their community. Paul says, I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral persons, not at all meaning the immoral of this world or the greedy and robbers or idolaters, since you would then need to go out of the world. But now I'm writing to you not to associate with anyone who bears the name of brother or sister, who is sexually immoral or greedy, or is an idolater, reveler, drunkard, or robber. Do not even eat with such a one. For what have I to do with judging those outside? Is it not those who are inside that you are to judge? God will judge those outside. Drive out the wicked person from among you. This sounds a little bit harsh, doesn't it? And yet, Paul is really looking out for the church in Corinth. And I think there's something important for us to learn here too. Excuse me. Before Paul addresses the issues that concern the church, he brings up a matter that he's apparently heard about from those who have written him in the earlier letter. There's a man in the congregation who is living in a sexual relationship with his stepmother. Previously, We learn about that in 1 Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians 5, 9 through 11, which we just read, Paul repeatedly refers to this situation using the Greek word pornos, which is used to refer to people involved in all kinds of sexual immorality. So he's been written about this particular instance, but he's broadening it, saying, hey, this isn't even about just this one time. Let's get this out of the way. The man's relationship with his stepmother was forbidden by Jewish and Roman law. Yet the Corinthians tolerated something that wasn't even tolerated outside of the church. Additionally, at least some of the church in Corinth seems to have adopted this Gnostic-like belief that nothing done with the body can corrupt a person's spirit, that the body is completely separate from the spiritual and emotional and mental choices that we make. So they would say, what does it even matter what we do with the body? These people did more than tolerate the man's situation. They even boasted about their acceptance of it. We don't know particularly how destructive this division had become, but we know it's enough for Paul to take a moment in his letter to write about it. We don't know to what extent this permissive attitude has affected the entire congregation. It could be a small group. Since we want to be loving and merciful, the thought of putting this man out of the congregation seems really harsh. But there are at least 3 reasons for Paul's instructions. First, Paul wants to protect the reputation of the church and ensure that it is distinct from the world around it. You hear Paul talk a lot about things being inside or outside the world. Paul is not here, he says, to judge the outside world. He says, we're going to be different. You've heard it said, in and not of the world. That's what Paul is talking about. We have to look and feel and behave differently. I'm worried about the church. It's similar to when a child says to a parent, well, so-and-so's mom lets him do it. And I would say, well, I'm not so-and-so's mom. This is a little bit of what Paul is doing here. He's saying, other people may be doing that. That's not how we're going to behave. That is not going to set us apart. It's not going to protect the reputation of the church that makes it distinct from the world around it. We're not just going to look like the world. He's clear in verse 10. He says, we are not going to associate with the sexually immoral, the greedy, the robbers, the idolaters. We can do that out in the world. We're not going to tolerate that within the context of the church. This is not an attempt to isolate the church. It's not saying we're going to be better, we're not going to talk to anybody. It's saying we're going to be distinct in this way. To engage in behavior that is considered disreputable by outsiders jeopardize the church's ability to interact positively with the outside world. And it placed the church in a position of justifiably being scrutinized in a negative light. If the church isn't going to do something it would even do in the outside world, why in the world, Paul is saying, would we put up with that? He's saying to the church in Corinth. Paul may also recognize that the people of the church have not confronted this man because he holds a position of prominence. He might be a major donor to the church. I know it's hard to imagine that happening, isn't it? But in fact, his conclusion is the membership may have enhanced his status. Perhaps this man has a higher level of membership because he's joined this church. Even today, people avoid confronting obvious immoral behavior because of someone's power or their wealth. So, my question for you, how can we strike a balance in which we can touch people's lives with God's love without falling victim to their toxicity? How do we balance that, what the writer of Proverbs offers about not being with angry people, not not letting our relationship change? How do we balance what Paul says about not being with robbers, idolaters, sexual, immoral folk? How do we balance not being part of those lives, those people's lives, having them as regular participants in our own lives, without forgetting to love them? How would you say you have done that? How do you balance loving someone even if you don't need to be around them, even if their behavior is not something that is that brings out the best in you? What are some ways that you have handled that? I'd love to see your comments. Caring for others doesn't mean sacrificing ourselves. Some people will drive us to anger with their combative demeanors. Some will seek to take advantage of our generosity. Others will defraud the poor of their property. Some will flaunt their immorality and expect us to quietly or even cheerfully just go along with it. It's important for us to consider the invitation that God is giving us in the Old and the New Testaments to set ourselves apart, to love the people whose behaviors we can't be part of, but not to be swept up into it, to be really careful about how we spend our time. Just like it's important what we take in with what we read or what we watch or what we experience, we also need to be careful about who we take in. Doesn't mean that we don't love people, but it does mean we set some boundaries about how our behavior is going to be, about how much those people are going to be in our lives when it might compel us to live differently. I think that's the lesson that God hopes that we will learn, that the people we spend time with should point us more toward God. And then we should point others toward God as well. So I wonder how you'll do that this week. How will you take inventory of those who you spend time with and consider if they point you closer to the Lord or further away? And then what do you do with that? Please pray with me. God, we ask for wisdom in discerning when and how to set boundaries that balance our own self-care and the care of others. We ask for forgiveness, God, when we have failed to respond appropriately to the struggles of others. And God, we ask for wisdom to know how to respond in such situations with love and humility and responsibility. We ask this in the loving name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. Next week, we are going to do something similar. We're going to be in Proverbs. We're going to be in chapters 26 and 30. Then we're going to pop over to Colossians chapter 4. So if you want to read those ahead of time, feel free. Proverbs 24 and 30, Colossians chapter 4. And we'll see where God has to take us. And I hope I get to see you again next week.